Audio Jungle.
Howdy and welcome to another exciting episode of Baseball Now. As always, I'm your host, Scotty. We got an interesting week we had in store last week. Upset galore and blowout galore last week. So before we jump on in, I want to remind everybody to be sure to hit that like and follow button on YouTube and Facebook, Cashin Sports, and our other channel, East Tennessee Media. Now, before further ado, let's send it on down to our McDonough Atlanta studio with Thomas for his weekly rerun and his look ahead. Thomas, take it from here.
All right, thank you, Scott. Let's go ahead and take a look at that Week 15 recap. We had Week 15 was headlined by a couple of close games, an upset or two, and a lot of blowouts. So let's go ahead and get to looking. The first game on the schedule, you have the Georgia Dominators. That's myself. 652 points this week over the Demon Duck Lindsay's. That's Greg at 342 points. That was a 310-point beatdown that was handed down by the Dominators, which is the widest margin of victory this year for the whole year. And might be the widest margin of victory the last 2 years. And this was during a 7-day period. Let's go ahead and look at the top performers for both teams. For the Georgia Dominators, one of the performers, Walker at 66 points. Crawford at 66 points as starting pitcher, and Alvarez at 52 points. Some big players right there. I was watching during the week last week, and Christian Walker was killing the Dodgers and also murdering the Ducks on his way to killing the Dodgers. Crawford had a really good outing on Sunday that just put the icing on the cake for the Dominators. And let's look at the performers for Demon Ducks. Profar at 33 points, Green at 26, and Fetty at 23 points. So you can see there's a wide gap between the Dominators' top performers and the Demon Duck top performers. That's one of the reasons why the scoring was so massive. The scoring gap was so massive this week. So you have the Dominators moving to 9-6, and you have the Demon Ducks moving to 10-5 on the year. Now let's go look at the next game on the docket. The Gatlinburg Cubs, that would be Scotty at 409 points. And the Atlanta Express, that's Ruben at 320 points. The Gatlinburg Cubs, they had this game all week ahead. They had a head start, a 65-point advantage in this game. And they maintained that. And the 65-point advantage would not have played a role in this game. It would have been much tighter than what it is, but still. So there's no excuse there. Let's look at the top performers for the Gatlinburg Cubs. Evaldi at 69 points, Reynolds at 48, and Albies at 36 points. And now let's look for the Atlanta Express top performers. Manana at 50. You have Irwin at 45 and Gurriel at 28 points. So there again, there's another gap. Just like the previous matchup we discussed, there's another big gap in the top performers. That's also, part of the reason for the gap in the scoring. The Gatlinburg Cubs moved to 4-11, while the Atlanta Express moved to 9-6, and they have lost a couple in a row. So the Express players are starting to slide a little bit and not perform like they should be. But don't fret, Express. I think you'll be back on the prowl once the All-Star break's over. I think a lot of things are going to pick up and change once that All-Star break gets here and is over. You got players that'll be refreshed. You got some players that are second-half players. So you may see them struggle in the first half, but in the second half, they usually get hot and get on fire. Another game we're going to look at, here's another upset, and Jackson's done it again. The Warner Robin Bombers at 474 points over the Wildcats. That's Tammy at 447. So Jackson's won another upset game. Let's look at the top performers for Jackson's team. Rooker at 51 points, Anderson at 48, and Lopez at 45 points. And for the Wildcats, Scooble 72 points, Kimbrell at 45, and Pavetta at 40. And I believe that Scooble is going to have the most points this week as a top performer throughout the whole league. So the Wildcats moved to 7-7-1. It's important to put that tie out there. And the Warner Robin Bombers moved to 5-10. Maybe trying to fight their way for a playoff spot, perhaps. So that's interesting to keep an eye on the Bombers. Can they do it again this week? And the Wildcats need to start getting some wins. We'll talk a little bit later in that playoff preview coming up, how they're starting to kind of struggle a little bit in the playoff formula. The next game we want to talk about, just a little crazy. That's Dan at 670 points this week. And the Chili Dogs, that's Ken at 424. This game wasn't really too close. Ken's has had a win over Dan. So this was kind of a revenge game for just a little crazy. Let's look at the top performers for Dan. Yelich at 55, Devers at 51, and Turner at 49 points. And for the Chili Dogs, Rodriguez at 63, Witt 47, Kramer 32 points. And so just a little crazy, they moved to 8-6-1, and the Chili Dogs moved to 7-8. So this week, you pretty much, if it's a sign of things to come, you have pretty much the standard barriers of the league, the Dominators, and just a little crazy, scoring the most points in the league. One thing to watch is could this be a flash in the pan for both teams, or are both teams or one team? Is this the turning point in the year where they start slamming the door on other opponents? We'll just have to wait and see. Every time somebody's tried to run off, with the division and run away, they've been reeled right back in by the rest of the league. So we'll have to see if that continues. And that has been your Week 15 recap. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at that Week 16 and what's going on this week. So you have the mother versus son rivalry between the Georgia Dominators, that's myself, and the Wildcats, that's Tammy. This is a crucial game in the series. This series is tied 1-1, and this could come down to a playoff spot, and this could be the deciding game right here if there's a tie. The Dominators at 9-6, and the Wildcats at 7-7-1. Right now, they're a game and a half behind the Dominators. So this is, like I've said, this is a crucial game for the Wildcats. This is really a must-win ball game. The next game is the Gatlinburg Cubs. That's Scotty versus the Demon Duck Lindsay's. That's Greg. And this game, this is another one of those games. Greg could go down. This is a trap game. Basically, with the extra time and the extra starters, this could be an issue for Greg, as the Cubs have gotten on the move a little bit. The Gatlinburg Cubs at 4-11, and the Demon Duck Lindsay's at 10-5 on the year. The next game, this could be a playoff preview matchup right here. You have Just a Little Crazy, that's Dan, versus the Atlanta Express, that's Ruben. This is a crucial game right here. This could be a playoff preview looking ahead. You've got Just a Little Crazy at 8-6-1, and you got the Express at 9-6. And the last game, you got a father-son rivalry. You've got the Chili Dogs at 7-6. That's Ken versus the Warner Robin Bombers. That's Jackson at 5-10. Jackson's been on the move the last 3 or 4 weeks. He's been hot, and which will be featured in our segment coming up. And Ken trying to squash all that. So that's going to be interesting to see how that works out. So let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and get a couple of notes out there. This week is an extended week because of the All-Star break next week. So it runs through the 8th through the 21st. And the pitching limit has gone from 12 to 17 for this week. So just keep that in mind. It's the same basically as the opening day where you had that long extended time. So managers, make sure you use this time very wisely. As you know, you don't want to throw yourself at 15 starters with 4 days to go on Thursday. You don't want to overdo it. But just keep in mind those two factors for this week's games. And that's been your look at Week 16.
Thank you, Thomas. That was another great weekly rewind and another good look ahead. Now we're going to take the opportunity to look at who's hot, who's not.
Now it's time to look at who's hot and who's not. So first up on who's hot, you've got the Warner Robin Bombers. That's Jackson. He's won 3 in a row. And you have the Gatlinburg Cubs. They've won 3 in a row. Now, their opponents for this week does get a little bit tough. For the Cubs, they've got a 10-5 Demon Ducks Greg team. And for Warner Robin Bombers, for Jackson, he's got his dad at 7-8, looking to get back to 500 and get back into the playoff race. And that is your who's hot, who's not. You have the Atlanta Express on here again. They've lost 4 in a row, and they have a tough opponent this week, and just a little crazy Dan. So that one's going to be a little bit interesting. And you also have the Macon Chili Dogs that have lost 2 in a row. So we're going to see how this is going to work out for the Chili Dogs. Quite interesting. They got a chance to get off the snide quickly. But, their opponent's Jackson, who's been rolling the last 3 or 4 weeks. So we'll have to see what happens there. But that is the who's hot and who's not segment.
Thomas, for that weekly who's hot, who's not, we're here in the Cash and Sports field where we're going to take a look at this week's Power Rankings, brought to you by East Tennessee Media. Coming in at number 1 spot is the Demon Ducks, who's at 10-5, leading the league. Coming in at number 2, moving up a few spots, is the Georgia Dominators, who are now 9-6. Followed by the Atlanta Express, who has dropped a couple of spots, down to number 3, who is also 9-6. You got Dan's Just a Little Crazy coming in at 8-6-1, followed by the Wildcats at 7-7-1. The Macon Chili Dogs have fallen below 500 for the first time this year at 7-8, followed by the Warner Robin Bombers at 5-10, and the Gatlinburg Cubs, my personal team, and I believe a fan favorite, coming up at 4-11, but they're winning again, off to another good start this week. So that's your weekly Power Rankings, brought to you by East Tennessee Media. Now let's go back to Thomas with the playoff picture.
Playoff preview time. So here we go. Right now, your number 1 seed would be the Demon Duck Lindsay's. That's Greg at 10-5. And your number 2 seed right now would be the Georgia Dominators. That's myself at 9-6. I will point out the Atlanta Express are also tied at 9-6, but the points for goes to the Georgia Dominators as a series is tied apiece at 1. Your 4th seed, you've got Just a Little Crazy at 8-6, and you've got out of the playoffs right now by game, a full game. You've got the Wildcats at 7-7-1. And you have the Chili Dogs at 7-8, down by game and a half. You have the Warner Robin Bombers at 5-10, and you have the Gatlinburg Cubs at 4-11. So let's go ahead and look at that playoff percentage by ESPN. For the Demon Duck Lindsay's at 94%. For the Georgia Dominators at 83%. For the Atlanta Express, 80%. Just a Little Crazy Dan at 70%. You have the Wildcats, that's Tammy, at 42%. Ken at 29%. The Warner Robin Bombers at 2%. And the Gatlinburg Cubs at 1%. Very interesting. Very interesting how it's folding out. It's like the whole league is back together again. 1 through 6 is now separated by only 3 games. So it was a little bit getting a little lopsided with the Demon Ducks and the Express a month ago, looking like they were going to lock up the first 2 seeds, and now those are starting to become in question again. Let's go ahead and take a look at the points for. Who's leading that category? Right now, the Wildcats are leading the points for category at 72.04. Then you have Just a Little Crazy at 70.76. Then you had the Georgia Dominators at 70.59. You had the Atlanta Express at 70.55. And then you had the Demon Ducks at 66.27. You have the Chili Dogs at 61.79. Then you have the Cubs at 61.23. And you have Jackson at 59.31. And that points for is crucial. I'll say it again. That points for is crucial. It is the second tiebreaker right after head-to-head. That's why the Dominators right now are ahead of the Express, because of points for. And let's go ahead and take a look at what would be the playoff matchups as of this time. The number 4 seed, Dan versus Greg, number 1. That would be an interesting matchup, as that would be a flashback from last year's finale, where Dan won by right around 100 points. And then you have the father-son, the Atlanta Express versus the Georgia Dominators, 2 versus 3. So that'll be very interesting matchup if that holds true. Usually a very tight matchup between the 2 groups. And I do want to point out, folks, again, that the trade deadline is fast approaching, July 22nd. That's a Monday at 12 p.m. And at 9 a.m. on that day, trades will be opened up where the review process will be out the door. But that's only on Monday at 9 a.m. on the 22nd. And that has been a look at your playoff preview and matchups.
Thomas, for that playoff picture. It's always great to talk to you every Monday. Folks, just as a notice, due to the All-Star Week coming up and the Home Run Derby, there'll be no bullpen show this Thursday, as well as next Monday. There will be no Baseball Now. That will not come until Thursday or Friday of next week, which will be the bullpen, which me and Thomas will both be on. So until Thursday, I'm your host, Scott, and I hope everybody has a great day, great evening, and be sure to follow and like us on Facebook and YouTube, East Tennessee Media and Cash and Sparks. Have a great, wonderful evening.